Eric,
Omar.
you know what we haven't talked about recently?
The fact that Eric Trexler looks a little more bold and less glasses wearing today.
Looks a little different. This is
It
true.
does.
Shout out to Trex Nation, which we do have to announce, Mike, because after Eric Trexler joined Iron Culture, like just the fan base of his exploded, and now we basically have to dedicate 5 minutes to the Trex Army every single episode.
I assume otherwise to get irate and physical.
Oh, yeah.
Not even physical, not remotely verbal, but it's more there's a look, there's an element within their look, Mike, that I wouldn't even say is disagreeable. It's like a polite, you know?
Yeah, they're a group of intellectual Buddhist vegans, so they never get mad, but they will certainly
And they're not disappointed.
look at you. Not even disappointed. Like most of them have evolved past that. One of them will acknowledge that they feel that disappointment, and then they'll reflect and apologize to you. But when they apologize to you, you feel bad because you know you did something that made them reflect, and they lost a little bit of their path to enlightenment. So we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah, honestly, that's really important. I'm glad you guys are addressing this.
Yeah, Mike, we can't do an episode without controversy, but that's why this episode is a unifying episode, and that's why, Eric, my question remains, you know what we haven't talked about a lot recently?
No, Omar, what haven't we talked a lot about recently?
Your bodybuilding journey. So I think if we
Mine?
dedicate yours, so I think if we dedicate
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask you this. So Eric, in the last few weeks, because it has been pivotal, what's been going on with you, you've been very vocal in the moment, in the trenches, reflecting, thinking about it, about how many episodes have you been on within the last 6 to 8 weeks? Forget Iron Culture, but just discussing this, roughly.
It's been a few. People have asked me to be on. I've been very privileged. So in all seriousness, I'm going to answer the question, and then I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask, as I often do.
This is off to a great start.
It is. So there's been the one Iron Culture episode where we did a deep dive. There was the one prior to that where there was the Schrodinger's Pro card. We ended up finding out we were in that reality.
Okay.
Still waiting for Arnold to become the president.
Is chat really exact too?
There was no cat in this one. This was whether or not I had a pro card. Omar predicted. He said, listen, you've got your pro card, even though I was a week out from the show.
Cat on transmission, Mike, found out about it.
Yeah, he got the call from himself, apparently. And I was like, is that the right Omar? Are we in that reality? We're a close parallel. We're minus Arnie, but I'm a WNBF pro.
It's typically, to me, like a call from yourself in the future, like, bastard, or something like that, or like, stop the flash. In this case, almost like Eric Helms is going to turn pro. Like that is important news.
That was,
How was your phone call from the future? Like everything's sorted, fellas. Eric, don't change anything crazy in your last few days. They're like, what about world peace? You're like, yeah, whatever. Eric will take care of that. If he's pro, well, who's going to stop?
Don't spill over too much. Hours before, don't spill over too much.
Yeah, pull back on the pop chips. So yeah, the important stuff is what we're using. Are apparently the time travel information, knowledge, communication we're going to get. So there was that one. We did then there was obviously the double up with Eric. We did it for the cover story in Mass as an interview with me and Lauren, which we released. That was less about my personal journey, more about the science of peaking. And then I had a really good time on Paul's engineering podcast. He's a good dude. He's a physique pro in Australia. I competed with him. So there's been a couple more, so maybe 5. But I will say, as someone who's an external processor to some degree, and I have to, when I like reflect, I have to do so actively, and I'm a bit extroverted, I've really appreciated the opportunities to do so because it has been a lot to take in, and talking about it out loud really does help me. So if everyone is tired of hearing about it, that's fine because I'm not tired of hearing myself yet.
Damn straight. Man, fuck all these people who hired us some shit. I know that's not really a thing, but like, Eric, you turned pro, that's a big deal. And it's a big deal forever. And nobody can ever take it away from you. But unless you get into this repeat various sexual affairs with your federation, I take away a pro card. And that's happened to me a few times. But honestly, man, it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And there's 2 types of people. There's people that know it's a big deal and let you lather in your winnings for as long as you want. And there's people that don't. And it's okay if they don't understand how big of a deal it is. That's it. It was not like a world in which it's get over it. Like, I don't know anyone who would ever say that.
And no one has said that. I've received an outpouring of support to the point
Only
where
Omar, seemingly. Omar seems to be like, hey, Eric, why don't you stop talking about this? Can I get these vibes, man?
I was about to say we're about to talk about Eric again on this episode, so I hope everybody's ready because we're going to need to use Eric as a springboard, I feel, Mike, to unearth Mike Israetel. So, Eric, I hope there's more Eric lore, okay, lurking somewhere there, because let me ask you this, Mike. People invite you on podcasts all the time. You're an incredibly knowledgeable individual. How often do you talk about your own personal bodybuilding journey, either on your, like, let's say, Renaissance periodization or on those podcasts? Like, is it something, I want to get into this, but is it something that you really discuss or it's more you keep it to yourself?
I don't think I've become a sufficiently good bodybuilder for people to ask me about my personal journey too much. So not a lot. I also think that on average, there's definitely exceptions to this. On the margins, my utility to people is slightly higher if I stick to either some combination of technically helpful advice for their own fitness journey and comedy. And if I get a little bit too much into my own, like, well, here's what I do. My biggest impediment to that is I don't really give enough of the shit. Like personal stories can be really fascinating. I don't know if mine is, and I have like a bit more to say than my personal story. I also think I'm in this position where because I haven't really achieved anything in bodybuilding, if and when I do achieve something of note, I will notify everyone who's necessary. Then I would be keen to get on some podcasts and talk about like the big journey. But certainly I've done it a few times. And Omar, you and I had a conversation off camera, which involved you showing me pictures I honestly don't think are appropriate to show a coworker. But after I looked at those pictures for an extensive period of time, we did have an opportunity to chat a little bit about the journey and stuff like that, and kind of my mindset mid-journey, which is also a great AI app. But I do have plenty to say on that. So it's kind of, I don't want to make it seem like I'm reluctantly agreeing to discuss the journey. It's just kind of one of those like, oh, someone's curious, I sure can talk about it. I don't go out of my way to talk about it much. And I guess the reason I'm saying that is maybe I'm just a little scarred. Just a thing with social media where people like to like send through the personal story. Like, this is what happened to me. I understand it's super relatable and it can really touch a lot of people. I just haven't leaned into that too much because I only have one personal story, but I have a lot of outlays of my intelligence that I think are actually much more productive than that. So I've kind of been like, oh yeah, I exist or whatever. I've done these things. But as far as like really, to put it negatively, navel gazing, I've done a whole lot of that. Some I'll definitely answer questions, but it's not something I lean to first. So you'll have to get these answers out of me, Omar, using your hands.
I knew it was going to come to this, Eric, and that's why teeing it up for Helms to also, we're going to two-man tag team you, Mike. It's the only way to accomplish our goal, I think. I'm going to ask some of these questions, but Eric has the perspective, exactly what you said, where you said people that know that have achieved, obtaining a pro card, how much it means. And so you guys there's a camaraderie in terms of the endeavor you do, me being kind of that perennial outsider. When I was asking you just some questions on your bodybuilding journey, I've been in close, proximity to Helms for a long period of time. I greatly respect his journey, his mindset that he brings to it. And then when I heard your perspective, it was different. And I was curious, like, is this commonplace amongst bodybuilders? Is this like there are many different motivational factors why people get into any hobby, right? Any interest whatsoever. But I think what I respected about you, Mike, is that it was like cohesive. Everything that you're saying, like you thought about all these things, you just haven't discussed it. And I think that's the part that I found interesting where you said, maybe I want to kick it off, man, where you said the statement, because you haven't achieved anything in this space, it's not of note to discuss. Do you feel then that one must achieve a certain level or you can accrue through time certain experiences of years and years, like doing these preps, like doing the damn thing to actually talk about it and share your journey? Are you just waiting for that moment? Or it's more, as you said, you have so many other things to say, your expertise when it comes to, exercise, nutrition, you rather talk about those things?
It's a good question. I think it kind of depends on what your purpose is for discussing your journey. If your purpose in discussing your journey is to generate more of a personal appeal so that your influencer brand increases in its reach and in its strength, then I think it certainly helps to have some accolades before you start talking about personal stuff. Like I could talk about my journey through the spelling bee world, which ended precisely in the 5th grade when I took 15. And so it could be, I could make it quite compelling, I assure you, emotionally. I don't know if people would have a lot to take away from that other than that, Jesus, this is the guy who is discussing this. It means he has nothing else better going on. So I think another thing is like, if you talk a lot about your bodybuilding journey, people are going to look into it. And if they find that the journey is a rather bereft of accomplishment, they might be like, well, if this is the thing you choose to talk about, maybe you don't have a lot of other valuable things going on. And so for me, my bodybuilding journey personally is not sufficiently impressive to me for me to talk about it. And I'm like that with a lot of things that don't have like a formal seal of approval. So for example, I have a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've competed. I'm technically a pro because I've been paid money to compete. And, I almost never talk about Jiu-Jitsu. I've put out no instructionals other than a weight training instructional for Jiu-Jitsu, which makes sense because I'm me. I haven't sort of posited myself as an authority, but boy, oh boy, do I have a lot of thoughts on how to train Jiu-Jitsu from a sports science perspective. I just haven't really shared them much because I'm going to get a black belt and then I'll share them. Because when you have a black belt, that's the same thing as being pro, really, in bodybuilding. That's what Jiu-Jitsu black belt is. You're officially recognized, like, yeah, that's it, pinnacle in some very important sense. And so until I get to a pinnacle somewhere, I don't always say much. I started posting on social media end of the year that I got my PhD. Until I got a PhD, I didn't really feel like, I didn't understand why really people would listen to me versus any other person. I still don't talk about corporate strategy and all that kind of stuff because I don't really run the corporate side at RP. And so even though I've made, my butler's counted my money yesterday, it was a sextillion amount of dollars, it'll weight of the world. We should store the money in a pocket dimension so it doesn't work gravity. But because I made that much money, you would think I'd be talking about how to make money, but I almost never do that because I don't really know if I know enough about that. If I just did a few things well enough to make lots of money, I haven't systematized it. So I can't claim to have systematized competitive performance if my own record has been very lackluster. But I can speak about the emotional and personal reasons I got into bodybuilding and how I've done with the journey so far and maybe what goals I have. But I think more of like a takeaway how to deal with the process type of thing than like, oh, there's Dr. Mike's going to have ways for me to turn pro. Like, that's Jared Feather, Eric Helms. I ain't me. When I'm sure when I turn pro, I'll magically inherit a bunch of knowledge. That's what happened, right, Eric? As soon as they put the pro card crown on you, you actually knew bodybuilding like Neo knew the Matrix for the first time.
Well, there's a tome in the back that has the inherited. It's kind of like Kung Fu, like the actual skills and techniques that you get are in a book and your body unlocks new things. So, you'll see top to bottom striated glutes that are a little more etched because I'm taking the tome lessons of Philip Ricardo Jr. That was page 10 that I got my knowledge boost from.
That makes perfect sense.
And I think that's why, Eric, my favorite episode about your bodybuilding journey was the most recent one with Trexler, because, Mike, it was deeply personal. I think as both of you are science communicators, you always think, correctly so, a lot of things that you speak about, what are some actionable pieces of advice I could give, or how can I tether this to something that's relatable to the audience, because you want to imbue them with something that they can utilize. But I think the beauty, Eric, when you shared your journey, is that when you got into the intricacies of yourself, it was the personal journey. And it's through the personal journey, to your point, Mike, I don't believe that Eric is going to try and leverage becoming pro in order to sell more programs or this and that. It's an intensely personal journey. He's excited to share it because while they might not be in a similar situation, I think they can respect the process and many different elements. And so sometimes, in a way, opening up about that and just strictly talking about your own rationale, which, like I said, Mike, for you, is very cohesive. Like, I found it compelling because I asked you like 5-6 questions, and it wasn't one of those things like, of course, you've been doing this for decades and years, and like, I've never thought about that, but you had like the answers kind of ready, and it all was part of a structure. So I found that compelling. But Eric, to yourself, this bodybuilding journey, I think that's why that episode resonated with a good portion of people, because you're able just to, once you achieve that result, once you became pro, you're reflecting on it, you're processing it, you're able almost to tie together the story of yourself and then explain it without thinking like, oh, like, so I did this. If I was to do a prep next time, guys, for the record, what I would do on week 8, right? It wasn't like full of key takeaways. It was the Eric journey.
Yeah, I didn't enter that episode, as I often do in a lot of our Iron Culture episodes, as an educator.
Yeah.
I wasn't attempting to use my personal experience to impart specific like learning outcomes, you know? I think the closest thing to that is maybe helping people understand my motivations for being who I am in our community space. Because I feel that I've gotten so much out of participating in bodybuilding, and that it's such a central core piece of my identity and how I express myself, challenge myself, make meaning of life, that I want to kind of give back. And like, if I wasn't a competitive bodybuilder and I didn't have this experience, I would have no desire to have gotten my PhD or to start 3D Muscle Journey or to contribute to mass or to write my books or to start Iron Culture. I would be doing something completely different in life, because something I've learned about myself is that I experience life by diving through some discipline, and then it kind of branches out into everywhere else. So to me, my personal motivational journey is the reason why everything else exists. So I think it potentially helps people understand, not that this is the reason I had the episode, but if there's anything instructional, it was that people understand why, like the qualitative aspect, all the quantitative information that I put out there, like, why am I in Iron Culture? Why am I writing this article? Why am I trying to help people? Why do I put information out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? That's why. And I initially got into trying to learn sports science or talking to other people or learning this stuff or reading anything, because I'm an athlete first, and I don't even know that I could not be an athlete first until I decide to retire, which I don't ever think I will. 80s plus class, Mr. Olympia one day, even drug-free, because, you know, who's alive at that point is taking drugs. It's going to be great. So, no, but in all seriousness, I think everything stems from that. And while people know me as the science communicator or the guy who does X, Y, and Z, or whoever, whatever arena they see me in, as the academic, the coach, all the kind of fingers, whatever pie they feel, oh, that's the representation of Eric that I'm familiar with. I guess learning that actually all of those are tendrils from the core of me as an athlete, I think is potentially helpful for them to understand where I'm coming from. But yeah, that wasn't the purpose. I didn't get on that podcast to teach people anything. I got on there to very graciously share my personal story, because I don't know. For me, I think competing in bodybuilding is something that is, it forces you to be introspective. It forces you to go through a transformative process. It forces you to a physiological state that makes you very emotional. And when you're emotional, you're more reflective. And when you're reflective, you have to consider things. And for me, I find contest prep itself as a vehicle for personal emotional growth, or at least the challenge that requires you to do that. So sharing that to me is, I just appreciate the opportunity, because it's a kind of a, I don't know, shit. You know, every society you can think of has a version of fasting, whether it's, you know, Lent or Ramadan or something like that. And it's, I think, a key part of the human experience that we've weirdly turned into a sport now, and since the 1800s. And yeah, obviously my thoughts are all over the place here, but I guess, yeah, wasn't going into it as an educator, so it felt very different. And I think it gives people insights into why I do everything I do that is public facing.
I think that's why it's so compelling. And that's what I'm saying, Mike. Take off the hat, sit down, relax with the Iron Culture bros. And let me ask you then, let's start at the end then, Mike, because as you said, you have an insane amount of money. You're absurd. Your butlers are rich. So,
I'm too rich. It's annoying, frankly.
It's annoying. And so for yourself, I believe you said, correct me if I'm wrong, though, Mike, your main motivation.
Mo money, mo problems.
Right. The main motivation.
And until you've lived it, Eric, it's just a fun rap lyric.
Yeah.
But for real, like, I'm up late counting my money. My fingers are chapped from counting this money. It's tough.
Yeah. It's a tough existence. And that's why, Mike, I appreciate you coming on to graciously share that journey. You did say, correct me if I'm wrong, For yourself, you have a planned end date and that's what I love. I think there is mutual, respect between both of you. The journeys, it's the motivations that are not related to either being enhanced or natural that are some. I wouldn't even call them differences, but there's an interesting perspective, Mike, where you said you have a finite cutoff date due to health reasons why you want to compete to a certain time frame, but also, quite frankly, man, you are very successful. You becoming a pro and continuing to compete, I think in some way you could leverage it if you if you really wanted to try and monetize it more. Maybe sure, but I think you could be just as equally successful if you didn't. So I don't think that's a huge factor. Yet you've achieved a place of comfort, a place in the community as a respected individual where it's not necessary for, let's say, social capital, right, Mike? So you're someone with a large following. It's not like, oh, I have 2,000 followers. If I win this, then it'll catapult me here. So a lot of, let's say, of the more obvious traditional motivational reasons, it's not really at the forefront. So you now being 39 years old, you've been doing bodybuilding for a long period of time. You are planning, you told me, and we can edit this out if that's not for public consumption. We said you're doing how do you say, a test prep, you will be competing again, right? Why?
Yeah. Couple answers there. So I started out bodybuilding, formally considering bodybuilding, after years of just weight training in high school, after years of powerlifting competitively in college. And towards the end of my competitive powerlifting career, I actually just picked up a Flex magazine, something at the store. And, it's toilet reading. So I read it cover to cover, a dozen times or something. I knew all the athletes' names and everything. I knew exactly how their bodies were shaped, let me tell you. And I really started to pick up an eye for the aesthetics. And because I was already decently muscular from powerlifting, I was like, that is a really cool look. And I never in a million years thought I would look like that, because at Flex magazine, people look like cartoons. That's nonsense, right? He's not relatable. I'd never seen anything like that in real life up to that point remotely. And sure as shit, not on myself. So I was like, this is just cool. It's like looking at paintings by a famous artist. You're like, I can't draw that, but this sure is nice to look at. And so I started training more like a bodybuilder because I just like to do higher reps and get a pump. Really, that's what it comes down to. And I didn't like the fact that strength training carried such a high marginal risk of injury. Every time you do a 1 or 2 rep max, the injury risk is, at absolute levels, very low. I always have to say that in case the pain people, the pain science people jump down my throat, whatever they are, they're always around somewhere. Or are they? Maybe it's just a hallucination. Never can tell. But but in relative risk, it's just much higher than it is for a bodybuilding. The probability of getting hurt doing a set of 15 and doing a set of 1, both taken to the limit, is just wildly different, probably by orders of magnitude. And so my experience, getting hurt through powerlifting, and I remember training for powerlifting, my bones hurt, my joints hurt. I was actually hurt a few times. Nothing crazy, but I just going. And what did I have to show for it? I was pretty strong. But then I saw other people in the gym that were jacked and lean and pretty damn strong too. And I was like, man, that looks cool. So I started doing it more and more. And I liked how the training happened. And that kind of got bigger over time. And did my first bodybuilding show in 2013. Just abysmal, just total disaster. And the sum total of hypocaloric fat loss dieting I did for that show was 7 months. So I dieted for 7 months. And the thing is that I was in kind of an information poverty situation where I just didn't have the people around me to help me with special sports supplements, with the drugs involved. But I took enough gear that my thyroid production was probably nominal. The thyroid was well, I'm going to take the next 3 months off, which never came back until after the show. And so I would do minimum activity. I would just shake freezing under my covers a lot. And I was holding so much stress-mediated body water that I couldn't really tell if I was prepped or not. And then I didn't carb up properly, didn't water deplete for long enough. I also have quite unique physiology. It would take me 2 or 3 days of water depletion to look my best. And almost everyone I talked to at the time was saying water depletion is overrated. You don't even need to peak, which for people on drugs and people with my physiological response is backwards, total nonsense. And so I ended up carrying 20 pounds of body water on stage. It was thoroughly embarrassing to the extent that it could be. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just not good enough. And sure, shit, don't know how to peak. So I'm going to train for a few more years. Entered another show. It didn't do so well, but notably better. I got sick like the day before. And then a few years back in 2021, I entered in 2020, I did a local show in Florida and like won the Masters division and won the open heavyweights. And I was like, oh, very well. And like when I was lined up on stage with guys, I'm like, oh, I'm winning this class. Dope. That's cool. And then slowly learning how to get leaner and learning how to get drier, not in such an impressive way. And then I hit Masters USA's and I took second in the super heavyweights. And out of a class of like 9 dudes, dude, one of these dudes, this black dude must have weighed like 330, bro. And his arms were like legit like 24 inches. He was like 6'4". And I was like, what the hell am I doing here? And then he was like 8th. And I was like, oh, that's right. Didn't diet. So you look down and you're like, oh, sweet. Those glutes look plump. But it turns out I was like one of the leanest guys on the show. And that second place made me think, I could turn pro maybe in the Masters division. And once you get that thought, it's tough to let it go. I talk to some close friends around me, people like Jared. Jared, as many in the internet know, is my biological son. He's like the realest person in the world. Keep it real with anyone, too real, really. And if Jared says you have the genetics to do something, trust me, he's cutting you slack. So you for sure have the genetics to do so. It's an opposite of that. So I was like, do I have the genetics to turn pro? And he's like, come on, Mike. I rolled. He's like, of course. And I was like, okay, fine. And, like currently, like I have loose striations and I weigh 240 at 5'6". Like I can't be so wrong. I don't have the best shape in the world, but like it's the worst shape. And like just slapping enough muscle onto something, sooner or later you will turn pro. There's a couple of bodybuilders in history that was clearly like, oh, that's a person made of various muscle groups. What's his name? Paco Batista from Spain. Eric, I don't know if you know him. Yeah, it's like it made by an artist who was on a lot of psychedelic mushrooms, listening to a lot of heavy metal at the time. But boy, oh boy, you turn around and you're 270, you have cross-striated hamstrings, you're going to win something. If somebody's going to give you something to be like, okay, get out of here, you're a pro. So once I got thinking on that, I thought, okay, I'm going to take a few years to really try to become either a pro or just really put something on stage that I think is like worthwhile. Have everything go really well and implement all of my knowledge kind of in one pinnacle moment. And then it's really important because I'm sort of known as an authority in the space to some extent. But if you look at my stage photos, am I really? And so I sometimes don't know if I am. And so it would be really cool to kind of really shit test everything I know to reach a really awesome peak. And so I talked myself into that. And that's kind of the tentative goal. I took my jiu-jitsu training and I took it down a notch to where it's almost all technical training. And it's not a lot of live rolling. I still live rolled with my wife. She's like half my size. So it's very low risk of injury. I mean, I get a lot out of jiu-jitsu training. It's emotionally super helpful for me. And it's way more fun than anything I've ever done. I'm really good at it. So it's even more fun. And I don't do it much. I do just technical, just the boring parts of jiu-jitsu training, which means I'm actually getting a lot better at jiu-jitsu. The technical stuff really is the stuff that you get better with. But also like, I'm just doing that so that I can front bodybuilding and have a much recovery adaptation window in order to do what I have to do. And I thought a little bit about what I want to do as far as time caps. I'm taking a crap load of steroids, and to kill you, they just do over time in various ways. They also at least acutely reduce your intelligence. I've noticed that. Say that again?
I said I've noticed that in you.
Yeah, yes. Everyone that's on steroids, it's just like you can throw a rock at them, like, where's the contra? But it's definitely a thing. And I've recently been able to solve that problem, thank God, with supplements. I'm going to talk about those. But that, is kind of like, at least in the short term, I don't enjoy it. Like right now, I'm on test, mast, VAR, and tren. And yeah, I'm not like feeling 100%. And so a lot of it's very difficult to take drug because of the emotional effects. Drugs give me a crazy ton of anxiety. They, again, acutely reduce my intelligence or verbal fluency. And they give me a ton of anger. I really, really do not enjoy anger as an emotion at all. Like not by a long shot. Recently, actually, I began taking a few supplements that have reduced my anxiety substantially. And so the anxiety used to be so powerful on drugs. That's kind of all I could feel. And then because the anxiety was going, I was really privy to the pure emotion of anger. And I was like, whoa, this sucks. I didn't want the anxiety back because that's way worse. But I was like, oh, okay, I have to learn how to be angry in my own head and then let it spill into incivility. So for me, the drugs part of it is the part I just fucking hate. But my body really likes drugs. And when I take them, magical things happen. And so I'm definitely a responder in that capacity. And because I've chosen this line a long time ago of going down the drug route, I'm sure shit can't come back and can't compete drug free. So consider that unethical. And so I just want to kind of put a stamp on like I finished this journey with my best look. And I think I picked through calculus, I could describe it as mind-numbingly boring. Age 42, that gives me a couple of cracks at the 40 plus masters division. And it'll, if I can't get it done in about 2 years of masters competition, I got to see myself out because I have plans for after this. And that's the number one reason that I'm cutting out early is I think a marginally higher probability of longevity is good. I have a very weird, I suppose you could call it a religion. It doesn't meet on technical merits. Some grounds it does. I'm a big fan of like Ray Kurzweil and the singularity and technological utopia, essentially. And I want to be around as much as possible into the future to see all that. But I don't think I'd have to be around for much longer than 20 years to reach essentially immortality. But I sure shit don't want to croak before then. And so, there's that guy at the gym. Every serious bodybuilding gym has him. He's like, 52 and he's red as fuck. And he's still jacked and his veins everywhere. And you're like, you can't just take Trent all the time, right? He's like, been doing it for 40 years, brother. I'm like, very well. Next day, he's like dead in his pool. And you're like I said, I don't want to be that guy. There's always that guy. Another thing to me is, and this is something I don't know if it's very defensible, but it's nonetheless how I feel personally. I wouldn't have a lot of interest in bodybuilding if I wasn't making objective improvements in appearance. Like my best at age 48, if it doesn't look like my best did at age 42, I actually have no idea how I would organize my training in the intervening years. I would just pick something that I would be getting better at. I am fairly well addicted to getting better at stuff. And if I'm peaked at something and I don't get better, I'm not really inclined to at least competitively do it. I would still train with weights, etc. But I have all kinds of different plans for after bodybuilding that involve still training with weights and some other things. So that's kind of my position in relating to maybe not why I bodybuild, but certainly the idea of sort of finishing on a strong note. I've considered walking away from the sport just about every time I run Trent. And one of the interesting curiosity about Trent, many people report, is it gives you an emotion of wanting to quit everything, like giving up. It's like
I'd say that's called depression or apathy, right?
It's depression without the reduced motor drives. So you're like, I want to give up. So it's
like aggressive nihilism.
Yeah, it's so Eric, it's a very so it's not a neutrality towards outcome. It's not like, oh, what does this matter? It's like, I gotta quit. I gotta be somewhere else. It doesn't matter where you are. You feel like you need to be somewhere else, like a recession into yourself. It's not planned. And so, when I get those kinds of feelings, I'm like, $1 gazillion. I'm already famous or whatever the fuck. I don't need this shit. Most people like me better for my intelligence and humor than my body anyway. Those things go off the charts if I stop taking steroids. What the fuck am I doing with my life? So at this point, I'm like an old man, just carving that sword on the fucking, the sword maker thing. Just one last fucking battle. And I don't mean one show or anything, but I mean like, I want to finish this on my fucking terms. And then that's it. So, yeah, it's quite sad, I suppose. I'm like old man Wolverine or whatever, except without spikes or powers or adamantium. Just a lot of Judaism to replace all those. Well, I just scared myself.
No, I was going to say, Mike, there's so much there, man. And that's why I really appreciate you opening up and sharing it. Eric, let me ask you, and then we'll get back to Mike, because there's something that Mike said that I saw you react, where you said there was a certain point in your journey, Mike, where you saw and felt truly, maybe for the first time, I'm not sure, that it's feasible to turn pro. And once you got that bug that like, I can do this, not, a superficial belief, like, yeah, I could do this, but like being there on stage, I'm hanging with the best of the best in this class at this competition. I can genuinely turn pro. It's right there. So that kicked things into the next gear, pun intended. Eric, can you just talk about that a little bit? Because you shared on your journey how It's like, as they refer with backup singers as an example, they call it 20 Feet from Stardom, where there's the lead singer and they're good at it. Like they have the vocal ability, but maybe there's something that's separating them from being in the back row to being in the front row. Can you just give a little commentary on that? And then, Mike, I want to go back to your journey. I'm loving it.
Yeah, it's bodybuilding such a unique. I'm going to call it a sport. I think it does qualify, but I think it could also be viewed as an art, and I think that's why you get so many disparate reasons for competing and ways of relating to it. So it's interesting to hear. Like Trexler and I aren't the same. Mike and I aren't the same. Mike isn't the same as Trexler, and which I think is really interesting. And I've met a lot of other people who see it more artistically or more competitively. And I mean, hell, you can compete in dance, and this isn't that weird for me because I actually did compete in breakdancing battles as a teenager.
Eric, your real life is the life I lie about to tell people that make it seem like I'm more interesting. Like, yeah, I used to do rap battles and break dance. Like, really? I'm like, no, Jesus Christ, when Eric did.
I mean, to be honest, I'm actually really grateful that I got kind of brought into the fold of hip hop because it's something that is an art form, but because of the culture that it comes up in, it always has this competitive drive, and you hear that in the way rappers talk about their skill, or graph artists tagging over each other, to DJ battles to MCing. And so the idea of competitive art to me has there's not necessarily a some type of conflict there, where I think some people who look at art very differently, or certain forms of art, or different artists, the way they express themselves, that's not a thing, right? And obviously art is an eye of the beholder. But anyway, getting off on a tangent, to answer your question, Omar, for me, it's been a bipolar experience where early on I had unrealistic expectations for a number of reasons. Just I had that drive. I had a desire. I didn't really know what I was getting into. And I also had really good hypertrophy gains relative to where I started from in my first couple of years of training. And I didn't yet know that just the ability to put on size naturally in a short time period means you're going to be a good natural bodybuilder. That has so much more to do with structure. And like Mike said, when he was told by someone he trusted, you have the genetics to turn pro, that was this is different. So for me, once I started competing and I had the rude awakening that I don't necessarily have the best genetics for bodybuilding, and that I got really close, but in 2009, but I didn't really feel like I was there. And I kept seeing people who were, once I started coaching, especially, I'm like, oh shit, this is like dog and pony shows. Like there's people who are built for this. They're the right height. They have the right limb lengths. They have the right attachments. They have large rib cages.
Ian Pearson.
Yes, exactly. Anybody in Flex magazine, right? Once I started to realize why my side shots are better, it's not that I have good triceps, hamstrings, and chest. You can't tell that I have a narrow rib cage and shoulder girdle. That started getting in my head, and it created this level of insecurity. And I even remember, technically, I turned pro in the broader sport of natural bodybuilding in 2011. And I don't mean this to disparage anyone or any organization, but the dispersion of competitiveness across the many, many, many organizations in natural bodybuilding means that you can get a pro card without that signifying the same thing as what it means to get an IFBB Pro League pro card. I was able to diminish that accomplishment because of my insecurity. And it wasn't until 2019 where I started to just look in the mirror as I was prepping and going, I look good. And I want to actually give a shout out to WNBF Pro. This guy's in his 60s, still looks amazing. And I saw him compete in 2009. He was doing the pro division and I was doing the amateur division. Rafael Caldiza. He told me, you have the lines of a Zane or a Benfato. You just got to stick with the sport and you'll do some damage. And I'm not sure I fully believed him at the time. But what I actually started to see is that once I filled out some of my weaker muscle groups and I brought up my upper body, I'm not going to say I look like Benfato or Zane, but I went from looking... Well, that was very purposeful. And also there's a twist and a waist thing but nonetheless...
It's not an illusion. It's real.
But Zane also is Frank Zane. Let's not pretend that I don't...
Eric Helms, Frank Zane.
No, it was an homage, not a, hey, same, So, but the point is that in 2019, I actually onboarded the reality that I don't have the perfect structure for bodybuilding, but actually I have some aesthetic, like I have a pretty physique. And when I first got into it, I wanted to be a monster, and I'm not, and I won't be. But I do have a aesthetic physique in its own right. It does look a little tough when I'm up against somebody who is the perfect little, X-frame nugget, but that is, but I have a look, and it actually is not incongruent with bodybuilding. I was like, maybe I can do this thing. And then to get so close in 2019, and to even get so close this season before I got it, it leaves you so hungry. And I almost want to share something that in a DM that Mike, you said to me. That's cool.
Please. Yes.
Yeah.
So with disparaging remarks about my
No, not at all. So, Mike and I, we generally just fight each other about science, according to the internet. But what they don't know is that each time one of us competes, we send messages to one another in support, because there's a certain bond that people who go through the hells of prep understand. And, I was trying to boost him up during his last couple preps. And during this one, he sent me a message and he was like, dude, congrats on the pro card. And he asked me, what does it feel like? And I had to really reflect and talk about it. And a big part of what it felt like was I have felt being right there and then having it, what feels like, taken away from you because of the subjective nature of the sport. Or sometimes feels like, yeah, but you're actually not worthy. You thought you were 5 seconds ago, you're not. So that is such an emotional roller coaster. Like I said, kind of this bipolar push and pull, that it puts a lot of depth to the experience of it that it means a lot. So, and it's hard to really get that across, but I think it signifies something that Mike asked me, what does it feel like to turn pro? He asked me about the feeling. So
another thing about pro is, to me, there's a certain magic to it, of a stamp that you have officially arrived. You're in the in-group, the cool kids club, whatever that means. No, I'm a grown man, and I don't need to be in a cool kids club anymore. My parole officer says my trying to join kids club is problematic and deeply a mistake. But it's when I'm hanging around Jared a lot, and I got to be honest, when Jared turned pro, I was there, and I was hung out with him plenty before he turned pro. And he turned national pro a long time ago, and then turned IFBB pro after that. When he turned IFBB pro, I'm kidding, no disrespect to anyone, but like fucking roaches from a dark room, other pros just show up. I don't know from where. I don't know if they get a fucking tracker, or they get some, when you turn pro, they irradiate you and they have goggles, they can see it. But and all of a sudden Jared's an authority, where he knew exactly the same shit before he got a pro card as after. But now it's like, how do I, and you, blah, blah, blah. To be a pro means something like Eric, especially for you, your example is actually perfect for this. Up until just a few weeks ago when you turned pro, if you sat down in an airplane next to someone and they just started bullshitting, how people do, you would say, they're like, oh, are you one of the muscle lifters? And you're like, yes, I'm actually, it's called bodybuilding. No, wait, bodybuilding. And then, and there, a lot of times you lead the discussion with, this is what I do. And it kick tips, is it a hobby, is it a career? Now, some people are a little persnickety. They ask, so you're professional? They know that exists. And there's a certain boss hint to, especially if you're jacked, fucking shredded, or look exactly like Captain America, to where you have to say, well, no, it hurts every fucking time it leaves your body. But if someone asks, oh, so you're one of the bodylifters? And you're like, well, yes, I am. Are you a pro? Yes, I am. I can only imagine how that feels. But it seems to feel like a warm glow of acceptance into the standard you set for yourself a long time ago. It seems like all of us who haven't turned pro, who ever thought about it, have been running a marathon of which the finish line is invisible. No, we're just still running. And you're doing victory laps now here. You're still running because you're still training, you're still doing everything. But pro is when you hit the ticker tape thing and it breaks. That's a big deal, because it's something that I think maybe can lock a person in the kind of approval that many people consider quite valuable to them psychologically. And this is just all from third-hand experience. I've seen a bunch of people turn pro, and I haven't seen anyone not collapse and start crying, completely honest, or very few people. And that's gotta be a lot there. And I think that you arrived, that I think has something to it. And I can't quit bodybuilding before I at least take a nice big sword swing at that shit. My best. And if my best isn't good enough, that whatever. Like, I'll just settle for being a, jujitsu killer, famous millionaire. Fine. But like, oh man, I want that shit. And at this point, it's a bit, maybe a bit egotistical, where it's like I'm not putting my worth into it, but when I want to put my full force behind something, it's a professional effort. I am a sports scientist after all. What am I going to do? Like lift a couple weights and go on stage? No, I'm going to run my life around this. So I really want to take that shot at it, because it would be an awesome finality to me. And especially, Eric, you plan on being a lifelong bodybuilder. I probably won't be in that same regard. Definitely not competitive lifelong. So for me, I'd love a go kick in the pants to kick me out of the sport with a pro card. If it doesn't happen, at least I'd like, hey, remember you at this show? Look at these pictures. Holy shit, you really did it. Like Dave Palumbo, he never turned pro, but there's pictures of Dave at 270 with striated glutes. Like, tell him he's not a pro. Shut the fuck up. If Masters Division worked like that in the 90s, he would have been a pro 10 times over. So it's less about pro, but more about that one final pinnacle physique. But nonetheless, the pro thing, it carries weight for sure.
Come on, Eric.
Yeah, there's a few things I want to add to there. It's I think that's because bodybuilding requires you to go through, unless you just have an incredibly low body fat set point and you never get that lean. But I think for the vast majority of people who stick with it, I mean, I'm sure there's always exceptions, and just by personality, I have to mention that they exist. I'm a researcher, but for the vast majority of people, it's a transformative experience that pushes you emotionally, right? We've established that. So those things have been a part of the human experience for a long time, I think. And people, like I said, they do fasting and they get religious-like experiences from it. I don't know, as a non-religious person, whether the things I experience, the heightened emotions, the highs and the lows, and the learning about new levels of self-efficacy and resilience that I get from prep are similar, but I suspect they are. And that also, at the end of these journeys, and if you look at historic people from everywhere on the planet, they are part of a rite of passage. And at the end of the rite of passage, you get a thing, right? You get some like, okay, now you're a hunter, now you're a woman, now you're a man, now you're an exalted member of the tribe, now you are the spiritual leader, now you are the chief, whatever. And again, this is me putting on my non-expert hat. I'm sure some anthropologist is like, yeah, ish, Eric, but I think I'm correct enough, to say that.
Or all elevations of status, big deal.
Yeah, something about the pro card feels like the most important. I'm sure, like someone who wins the Olympia or wins a world title as a pro, in the overall it might be different, but not everyone gets to be like the exalted hero of the tribe forever, like kind of thing. So I think the attainable kind of stock standard, like, I remember in the military, like you treat special forces guys different than infantry, right? And them accomplishing that means something. And it's not like you don't have self-worth if you can't achieve that. And it's not like I wouldn't be proud if I'd never gotten above being a top amateur in the WNBF, and it's not like I don't have a solid sense of self, but there is absolutely something about the completion of a rite of passage and a formal acknowledgement from the culture that I'm most feel myself as being a part of, that I would echo what Mike is saying. And I think there's also something to be said for when that converges with, or if in its absence, you have that time, you have the stage pictures, you have that day where you were like, I looked the best I ever have in that moment. It is like the experience I would imagine of an artist having that piece that they unveiled, and everyone is like, holy shit. and like random women are crying seeing it, and the guy's having an existential crisis, and you're like, I made them feel that, you know? So I think that's the equivalent of having the perfect for you, or your pinnacle at whatever you could do within that season at that time in your development for the time you had to the gift of being in the sport. Like even for someone who maybe you don't really like Dave Palumbo's physique, but for Dave, he's only got what he's got. And he had that moment where he was shredded, peaked, crazy, not pretty, but man, he looked like maybe not a Marvel superhero, but a Marvel supervillain who probably fought the Hulk, you know? And for him, he looks at that and goes, that was it. So that moment, even if you don't, you know, turn pro, I think is similar. So that's the kind of the artistic element. It's the rite of passage element. I think all those things are encapsulated in it. And bodybuilding forces you to put so much of your soul into the process that if you do have an external goal like that, whether it's just the perfect presentation or whether it's turning pro, when you do finally get it or when you get close, there's no way for it not to be an incredibly emotive experience.
This has been fantastic, Eric. Thank you for that. Because we're getting to the heart of it, okay? The man is sitting on the couch. We're discussing these things. I knew that Mike, the first time we met up for that Borshako project, we're mainly doing that project. You're fantastic in that. So we really didn't get as much time to discuss certain things. But you were talking at the end of that deload session about your own journey. But then the second day, Mike, there's something that was very curious that you used when describing the overhead press, where I knew you're like a lifter's lifter. And so it could come in many different permutations. It could be a powerlifter, you could be a bodybuilder, but you're a lifting enthusiast where it means a lot. When you described the overhead press, what I found common ground with you on, when you described it as a spirit lift, where you said it's a lift for the soul, where you're thinking about and you're doing these things. It's not just like, I'll go to the gym on Tuesday and yeah, let me try and hit an overhead press. It's something that fundamentally means something at the time for you to do, and that's why you did it, and now you're on this bodybuilding journey. Let me ask you the question, what Eric just said. You described at the start how looking at a painting and looking at it, it's like, oh, that's awe-inspiring. Like, what would that feel like? Or you see these physiques and you thought, if one day I can achieve that. You spoke about being close then.
Didn't think that, by the way, Omar.
What?
I never thought I could achieve it in a million years.
Oh, sorry,
I
never.
just thought they were beautiful for their own sake.
Yes. Yeah. It's about if.
Sorry, the girls that don't talk to me, go be beautiful somewhere else. You know?
Yeah. If but one day, and now, but man, you're on your journey. Let me ask you this. So Eric talks frequently about this spiritual component, right? What it has done for him, how it's forced him to become more introspective about himself, his motivations, many different things. I see parallels here. Can you maybe give some commentary in regards to that? Do you feel similarly? Is that a little bit different? Because I am seeing shades, like I'm seeing enough of a crossover here. But can you discuss just that component maybe, Mike? Let's frame it this way, of what bodybuilding has meant to you or how it's changed you, the way you think, any of those sorts of things, and whether there is that spiritual dimension. Because I've heard shades, like I said before, but I want to hear from you now, like what kind of this journey has been like for you.
Yeah. It's a great question. I could talk about it for a while. I'll try to keep it brief. I could talk about this for hours.
No, you go.
But,
we have time. Mike's like, actually, I got it.
No, I don't have time. I'm a busy man. I don't know about you fools.
Just ramble for an hour straight. You're like, oh, okay, that was Dr. Mike. Thank you so much. People can find him probably nowhere. Okay, bye. So the spiritual component of bodybuilding, for me, is a subcategory of the spiritual component in pursuing things that you have some talent in, and you pursue them to a goal. But the way that goal presents to me in my mind and in kind of my spirit is never a finality. It's never a destination specifically. It's to me, bodybuilding and a lot of the other things I've done in life, which were difficult, getting a PhD, maybe not difficult, they require a considerable amount of work, effort, jiu-jitsu, etc. To me is like looking at Mount Everest when the peak is beyond the clouds. You don't think, I'm going to get to the top of that. I don't. I go, it looks kind of interesting up there. I wonder how high it goes. I wonder how high I can climb it. I wonder what I will become if I climate a little bit there. So when I was in high school training with weights, I grew very quickly. And every degree of satisfaction from getting jacked, which I absolutely did absorb, I loved it, still do. There's that little kind of silver lining of, what about this? Is there any more out there? Is there anything else? When I was a kid, one of the shows that had a big influence on me, and I don't even know if it had a big influence as much as it opened up something inside of me that was there anyway, was Dragon Ball Z. And Dragon Ball Z, the fighters train to become orders of magnitude more strong than before. And there were sort of two types of people in Dragon Ball Z. One was the type that trained every now and again, or were villains that never trained at all. And then like the addicts training that just left everyone behind and then left that version of them behind. And that had such a huge, profound impact on me. It really illustrated the emotion of what you experience when you elevate, when you go to the next level and the next level and the next level. I'm in the bodybuilding journey, but every journey I'm in for the purpose of being like, oh, I'm pretty good at this. Let's take another step forward and then another step forward. Let's see how rarefied the air is. Let's see how soon everyone around me passes out because they're out of oxygen. Let's see if I can rub my fingers off the bone crawling up that fucking mountain. Let's find out how far this goes, because it's all about ascension. There was a part of a Dragon Ball Z episode, which to me was like this line, this event was really important. It really struck me, and it very much sort of symbolic of why I'm in bodybuilding. And it was these two guys, Vegeta and his son Trunks. They go into this place called the Time Chamber. The Japanese nailed something about the human condition of the place. It's a place where there's one door, you go in, and there's this room that's infinite. You look as far as it goes, there's nothing out there. The gravity is stronger. There's just enough food and weights and things for you to train for 1 year. Only a day passes on Earth, but 1 year, you can't get back out. And it said nobody goes in that room because most people just go insane. As soon as I heard about that at age 13, I was like, whoa, I could just have that in my office while I do schoolwork. I can push my mind to the point of discomfort. Because why? Because when Vegeta and Trunks went into the time chamber, then they came back out. One of the other characters, Goku, was about to go in, and nobody knew how their training in there had went. And it was sacrifice, brutal. It was like life or death training. And Vegeta comes out, and he's like, oh, I'll take care of everything now. And Goku's like, Vegeta, I mean, to be selling the androids, but you have to triple your strength. And Vegeta just smirked. Goku's like, what? And how did he do it? He went into a place which almost no one goes to, and he suffered and nearly died. And then he came back out, and the android that broke his arm in the last fight wasn't even in the fight. She was looking from behind the mountains as he was beating to death the person she was running away from, as he was orders of magnitude stronger than her. He didn't start to pass a level. He jumped up 2 levels at the same time. That kind of ethos, that ability that if you go to some place and you suffer and you suffer and you suffer, and you just at some point don't care anymore. I don't care if it hurts. I don't care if I get hurt. I don't care if I'm displeased by the outcome. I don't give a fuck. I had elements in my last prep, which I went way overkill. This is a problem for me, overdoing it, and I have to rein it back. In my last prep, I was giving my wife a massage, and I realized I couldn't stand anymore because my legs were just shaking because I had done like 14,000 steps with very few carbs for the last 7 weeks. People say like, oh, you're flat and full. I was full for 7 weeks straight. I didn't care. It's okay, because all that terrible suffering, somehow through some kind of mechanical spirit machine, it's transmuted into result. And of course, as a sports scientist, that's overreaching. I absolutely overtrained for my last show, so it was really terrible. So you have to balance that with relaxation, etc. But that idea of finding out you're decent at something and not asking the question of like, oh, this is cool, I'd have fun with it, but asking the question of, can I just go a little further? Can I go a little deeper into the void? I don't want to go. If the timetable was real and BBC Universe wasn't real, I'll tell you exactly what I would do. I'd disappear into that motherfucker. I'd never come back. And then they would be telling legends about me. They say, you still think he's alive in there somewhere? And someone would be like, imagine how strong he is. I never want to come back. Maybe for one episode where they're like, how strong are you? And you just go, and a planet on you crunches and just disappears. You're like, oh, okay, he's been at it this whole time. The idea that you can recess away from society, escalate or elevate yourself, and then come back just changed is a contest prep in spiritual terms. That's why I do this shit. Like, if I can continue 2 weeks look different, it ascended, and if I can feel the difficulty of it, then to me, I'm getting all my boxes checked for sure. I want the grind. Like, I used to leave jiu-jitsu with fucking scars on my face, bleeding, big ass black belts beating me, spiritual release, total, just huge peace with everything. Because if the crazy homeless guy tries to fight me, I know one of two things. Either I could almost certainly beat the living shit out of that guy, or two, if he kills me, I'm already free. I've already died in jiu-jitsu. I go 10 times today, having a tap and having my shit ground into a pulp. Ego death. Actually, I've done a lot of mushrooms before, and I had to be told by somebody else the experience that I've had mushrooms was actually ego death the entire time. I realized, like, well, if I have a whole lot of ego left, if you get beaten to a pulp in jiu-jitsu enough, you grind through enough bodybuilding preps. I don't know, Eric, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, ego is something you protect and defend and shell around. I don't have any defense left, man. I gave all that shit up. Like, you vomit from leg press enough times and you're like, there's nothing in here left to protect. It's a good thing. It's a liberating thing because you're getting yourself totally into this process of transmutation, of change, of ascension. And however much I have to pour of suffering into that glass, I don't care. I don't care if there's no glass or there's suffering in the fucking ground for all I give a shit. Part of it is for the result, for the success, sure. But mostly it's in that fucking grind, man. I live for that shit. My office I'm sitting right now, there's all white walls and it's in a basement. That's how I work. Like, it's this deeply spiritual, deeply philosophical. If I'm being ground into a pulp in order to ascend into something better, I'm at home. If I'm not doing that, it means I'm on vacation. I only have about a week of vacation until I start to go insane. Go, I need to fucking grind. So that's my whole purpose for bodybuilding. Anything else difficult I do is self-immolation for transcendence.
That's what we're just Mike. That's
Makes
what
some
we're
sense on
discussing.
that.
No, man. This is why you're here, Mike. This is the episode. Let's go. You should talk about this more, man. There's many parts of the journey. And then, Eric, I want to hear your thoughts. We joked about self-immolation when I visited you. I haven't released my first episode yet, but Mike, check this out. For my journey, my new journey of lifting, of doubling down, having the time. It's actually called, you use the word ascension 3 times. It's called The Ascent. Is like kind of the title of it. It's a parallel, like one of my favorite movies of all time it's called The Ascent by Larissa Shapiro. But it's like just that journey. There's a lot of elements there I want to hear from Eric because I could tell, Mike, that's what when we had, you could see game recognizes game. You could say enough verbiage, like when we're discussing some of the things. I'm like, Mike has a lot of thoughts on these things. And I love to hear that. Eric, your thoughts?
Just got excited. Those are my
I'm ready to
main
train.
thoughts are there. Mike did a very good job of encapsulating the mindset at times that is part and parcel of contest prep, and that was absolutely my 2009 contest prep, which without getting too personal and actually distracting from the purpose of what I want to say to commentate on Mike's thing. I lost my father in very tragic circumstances very early on and had no coping skills yet to deal with that. I don't think many people do until they go through something like that. So the very next day I did a powerlifting meet, and that was the first time I pulled 500 pounds, and pulling that 500 pounds meant something far more than getting a 5-pound PR. I remember I slammed the bar into the ground so hard and yelled that I had a bruise on deep into my bone for 3 months, and I couldn't deadlift without straps because I had, when you slam a metal object that won't move into the ground, it just reverbs into your hand, and your hand goes, "I'm not metal," and then you have a bone bruise. And that was a necessary cathartic experience for the limited coping ability I had at that time, and that continued as I dieted from January till the end of September and competed. And I was doing HIIT intervals 5 days a week and 3 days a week. That's more than 7, folks. I was doing an hour-long list sessions, and I got down to 1,500, 1,600 calories, and I just told myself I'm not going to stop until I'm shredded because I didn't get shredded last time, and I don't care. I don't care what it takes. And that resulted in a hamstring tear in April. And I think to Mike's point, we both know, and I even knew then, this is dumb. This is not the way you do it. This is actually not the way you turn professional, but it is an essential piece. It's one side of the blade that every bodybuilder needs to hone. And I think the difference between most amateurs and most pros is that they've got this side, which is the I will jump in magma if that's going to help me do this. And then eventually, when you go through that and you have actually committed to a prep to that degree, and you see that it's a necessary component, but it's also potentially what's going to hold you back, and maybe even exit you from the sport as you find your limit and surpass it and burn out, which I think we can't speak lightly on this because the survivorship bias in bodybuilding is very strong. There are a ton of people who, hey, I'm not wearing the Icarus, right? Like, you get too close to the sun, and a lot of people burn. And bodybuilding does that to a lot of people, even more so on the enhanced ranks, unfortunately, because the stakes are higher and you're pushing yourself further. But it happens even in natural bodybuilding. And there's a lot of people who think the sport is bad because of that. But I think a better way of looking at it is that is, you need that. Like, you need to have that ability to go far in bodybuilding. Again, exception, because I have to as a researcher, unless you just happen to have the genetic freak gifts where you're like, yeah, I can shred it. It's a little tough. It took me an extra 4 weeks of dieting compared to when I only got the bottom half of my glutes striated for the summer that one time. It's like, okay, everyone hates you. There are people out there like that, don't get me wrong. And they maybe only get tested once they're actually trying to win like professional worlds or something like that, or the Olympia, and they go against other people like that. And then they do have to find that out, and they realize, okay, I do need that side of the sword. But from there, I've learned this as both a coach and a competitor. And Mike talked about this quite well on the Revive Stronger podcast. The ability is far more important to actually know what your current limits are. And it's not to put limits on yourself, and you can't exceed them. And that's part of this addictive process and the spiritual component we talked about. But knowing when you're butting up against your limits and when you'd be better suited to get recovery emotionally or physically, that is when you really start to fill up your cup and you get that other side of the sword. And now you have twice as many weapons, if you will. And I think that is what pros more often than not get, who aren't just gifted and win it too early. But especially someone who's had to grind and become a pro and they don't have the natural talent to do it early, is you really have to figure out the push and pull. And that is like this whole thing of like, you develop this beast, you realize that you've had this animal inside of you who can push to the point. And I think almost every creature does on the planet, because we're survival machines, right? Like, if we don't experience this in modern society, but when you actually get to the point where you have to risk your death to get the next food or water, or run away from a predator, or hunt down prey, whatever, a biological system, if you look out in the wild and you watch nature documentaries, you're like, oh my God, animals are badass. It's like, well, humans are animals. So I think it's in there. And once you kind of awaken a small piece of that through this ridiculous thing we call flexing in Speedos, and I'm really trying not to make it into the bodybuilding equivalent of powerlifting, where it's like squatting a max is going to war. It's like, it's not. We can calm down. But I tell you, viscerally, what it feels like to go through contest prep is maybe connecting with that piece of you that is willing to die for an outcome, right? And you don't think about it too much, but it does feel like that. And that opens up a level of self-efficacy, self-belief, a surprise at what you can accomplish. And then it's all about taming that beast. And that is the process where you actually become a skilled bodybuilder. You become someone who can navigate in and out, be aware of when you're surpassing, maybe not your limit, but for example, this prep, something Berto gave me some props for is we were running like 11 low days in a row before one of my shows. And on like the 8th or 9th day, I was like, dude, my sleep's really messed up. I could tell like the level of fatigue I was getting was maybe counterproductive to the goal and more than I thought it should have been. And I only knew that from experience. And I hit up Berto and I was like, hey man, can I have an extra 300 calories today? I think it'd be better. And he was like, absolutely. This is a skill I've wanted you to develop for years, Eric. So I kind of got it in 2019, but I got to a point where I was like, now let me just buckle down, because my default setting is, well, let's just push, because that's safer. I know I won't backslide, and I know it will take effort. But to actually learn how much effort it takes on a fine-tuned, auto-regulated, self-aware level, that takes years. And it's really cool that I've learned that now. And it just so happened to coincide with when I was then told, by my community, yes, you have displayed that level of knowledge. You are a professional. So it's like the convergence of all those things, sharpening one side of the blade, sharpening the other, and that being the proverbial understanding that you have this survival instinct that can push you way further than you thought your limits were, and then going, but I shouldn't always. And in fact, that can be counterproductive. And now this is going to become, I'm in control of myself. I'm not just this raging animal. It's like when the Hulk is no longer turning into the Hulk, but he can become the Hulk, but still have the mind of Bruce Banner. Like that's kind of what you're trying to get to in bodybuilding.
Yeah, for sure.
Mike, let me ask you this. So we went into the void. We went into the hyperbolic time chamber. You said you never, I love that, where you could become this elusive figure. You'd go in, never come out. And people are like, that person went, I wonder how strong Mike actually is. So just constantly leveling up. Eric just spoke before about a cathartic element of either bodybuilding, the prep, that aspect. So you spoke about the spiritual ascension. So the idea of, consistently getting better at something, that feedback loop, the desire to push yourself more than ever before. Have there been any unexpected either lessons, feelings, thoughts in your own bodybuilding journey, like things that may have surprised you where you thought like, so let's go back to the Flex magazines. You're looking, you're like, gosh, I could never look like that. And then somewhere between then and now, we're like, I'm going to do this damn thing. Let's see how far I could go. Has anything kind of surprised you, caused you to reframe the way you think about yourself, others, anything about the sport? Like, can you give it a little bit more commentary? I love that discussion, the spiritual component for yourself, the way that you see it. Just talk a little bit more about that, man.
Yes. I was probably for my first show when I was taking a dump and, of course, reading Flex magazine. And I remember I had already seen myself in the mirror, every workout up until then. And that was the first time I had been quite lean. And I was right around 225, 230 pounds, with clear abs and everything like that. I remember looking at some of the contest highlights of the magazine, and there was a guy there who won at like welterweight or something, middleweight. He was like 180 or something. And there was a photo shoot with him. And I was like, this guy's kind of small. And I was like, what the fuck? A pro bodybuilder in Flex magazine? You just had the honest sensation of seeing him as small. And I was like, no. And I was like, wait, I'm bigger than that guy. With just on any metric you can imagine, I'm just bigger. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Very well. I'm in a different place now. Much less little kid looking at bodybuilding magazines. Much more like, oh, whatever. That's definitely possible. So that was definitely kind of a cool experience because it was like, oh, okay, this isn't outlandish anymore. So that was kind of neat. I did have the experience, my last prep. It's a fun story. I told it a lot on Steve Paul's podcast, so I'll just keep it brief. So decided to diet, and the sum total of diet was, I believe, like 18 weeks. And I didn't start out fat at all. And hopped on Tren about a month out. About a week after that, I was like, fuck this, never again. And I just decided I didn't want to feel angry and anxious and upset all the time. So I started lowering my doses of gear. And I was like, oh, also, androgens are the thing that pull in body water. So if I get more of that dry, natty look, which is a common practice in your bodybuilding, some guys will pull their doses down towards the end and really get that crispy. Because dry, natties get more dry than everybody else. It's common knowledge. And then so it's like there's dry and then there's natty dry. There's always you think you're dry, there's always some guy at a natural show that was like, how the fuck are you alive? Like, what is it? Do you like flex your bicep and it tears off the bone? So I thought I'd do that. But what I did was I kept pushing the deficit and I kept pushing the cardio like crazy the entire time. So I just overtrained. And so the overtraining left me in a position of feeling like an animal that you put in a drain pipe and you're poking with a stick, defensive victim, and kind of recalcitrant and angry. And then I stepped on stage looking not so great, took fifth. And then I got into a situation where I started reading Instagram comments about myself.
Ew.
And these comments are, ostensibly addressed from like, they're humans, like they're not just trolls. Like troll incel comments, I don't bother with. Like if you don't have a profile picture, I just don't read your comment because you're not a human being. I'm kidding, but only halfway. You don't present as a full human, so I treat you like a ghost. But these are real human beings, real bodybuilders and stuff. Mostly, well, exclusively not people that are good at the sport. Almost all of them worse than me at it. But they would say things that really got under my skin. And things like, you just need to learn to put the fork down and shit like that. And what I wanted to say is, I should want to reach out to them and say, you've never met anyone with as much willpower as me. I don't guarantee that. The statistics are what they are, but I bet a decent chunk of change on it. And whatever it is you think you're good at in your life, I'd probably take about a year and become an authority in the field in which you think you're good. Fuck you. Who the fuck are you? And that nasty critter that's getting put with a stick. I was that guy. And I was like, first of all, I enjoy having these thoughts. Second of all, this is just some guy who has feelings on the internet, and like, never about me he didn't like. It's just his opportunity to unload. And the thing is, every now and again, I see these guys in real life and I always look down, because like, in the real world, I'm 240. I'm a fucking brown belt. So don't fucking look at me. And everyone knows that. So it's totally cool. Just so that it just got a lot of that gorilla alpha male, the beta male, where the alpha's picking on you in front of females and you bite his hand off, that kind of energy. And I was like, okay, you know what? This sucks. And I took many a shower in the few days after that, few weeks, fantasizing about brutally killing these people with my bare hands, or just meeting them in a place and looking up at them with the Russian guy stare and just watch them drop their eyes. Because I had one word in my head to describe it: kneel. Kneel, you are in the presence of a superior. And I was like, this is so fucking pointless and so fucking toxic, and also so wrong, because these people are beautiful people in their own right. Like fuck it, I killed the guy. He's like a mechanic in Pennsylvania, and he's an amateur bodybuilder, and he sucks at that. And I kill him. I rip his jaw off his face, and he just dies right there. His wife runs out, and his two kids run out. They start crying. What the fuck am I going to feel then? Like, oh my God, wait a minute, I didn't do this. And so, nothing ever happened. Of course, I'm not an insane person, but I'm looping this in my mind, and I'm like, you know what? Fitness influencers are super fucking lame, and I hate them all, including myself. But like, they're onto some shit when they talk about positivity. And I'm like, man, I just have no, I mean, I went as far into that shit wormhole of negativity as I could, and I didn't come out stronger. I came out bereft of any value. Like, I really focused my fucking rage on a few people, and I got nothing out of it. They weren't notified, and thank God. Why would I spill negativity over on them? And when I wasn't overtrained anymore, I took like 4 weeks off, more or less, of lifting. Then I started to have a very positive disposition. I was like, oh, well, no big deal. Like, they're going to be okay. And why would I hate these people? They're just humans, and we all say stupid shit. I say stupid shit all the time, saying stupid shit right now. So I was like, I learned a really important lesson from this. You do what you do in competition. And then after the fact, if anyone gives you criticism, I learned since that a very, very awesome kind of cognitive mechanism to handle that. And so I have an impression. I have a few impressions that all suck. But Jared and I like do this impression to each other. It's called 50 Kid. It's like the stereotypical Leave It to Beaver kid, like, oh, gee whiz. And he's sort of always out of the loop. But 50's Kid has one major feature. He never takes anything personally. It's like 50's Kid's walking down the street, and some homeless guy's like, and he's like, oh, that man must be having a bad day. I sure hope it brightens up. And you're like, what's nothing get to you? If you just have that attitude and any kind of criticism, it just completely negates it instantly. Like, someone's like, you suck, Israetel, quit fighting. I'm like, oh, gee whiz. I guess I'm not the best, that's for sure. And that's it. That's all the thought I have about it. And I'm like, am I missing something? Should I be parsing the person's text for some deep insight as to how I'm doing wrong? Like, well, no, none of these people have deep insights. What's going on? They do this and they yell, they shoot trend, and then they quit. The girlfriend breaks up with them and they start eating meals again. And they post something on Instagram like, I'm putting back on the wagon, fellas. That's the people we're dealing with. That is actually insightful people. They don't mean their comments insightfully. They're just spewing out into the void. And I used to take it, and I was like, how do I make meaning out of this? Person challenging me, they think better than me. And then I realized, like, it's just gunk. And if I just 50's Kid it the fuck away from me and just like, shit happens, then big time elevation. And that's been hugely helpful. And I think if everyone was always, mostly like being, because I get, like, on the other hand, I get a ton of praise all the fucking time. Like, I'll log in any YouTube video that we post. Dr. Mike's the smartest guy of all time. Dr. Mike's my hero. Will you marry me, Dr. Mike? It's always dudes. And if the answer, fellas, is yes, as a matter of fact. But, you get enough praise and you're like, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. But in some sense, you grow more from getting harsh criticism, especially deeply personal criticism. And one of the ways in which I grew was I realized, like, you know, people have some feelings about me, and no, I'm not perfect. I'm not great. And yeah, I did suck dick at that show. What am I going to say? Like, argue back? Like, yeah, but no, I suck. It's okay. That taught me a shitload. It was very painful. I did not learn the lessons immediately. I stewed for weeks. Like, I got not an argument, but just like my wife was like, hey, like, you know, when you were posing, I could tell that you knew you weren't going to do well because you looked pissed. And I was like, I was pissed. And she's like, okay, that's not professional. And I'm like, I just didn't really have a response. And I was like, oh, that's true. She's right. I didn't really feel like she was right until weeks later. So that whole process of doing something, so like I burned everything to get to that point. I was barely walk. I could barely do shit. I was completely dilapidated. And my gift for that was taking fifth, where I was fully planning on taking second or something like that, hopefully. You always want to do at least some like your past show or better. And I got nothing for it. And giving everything to something and getting nothing in return is deeply painful. Nothing, just a lot of hate comments. But at the end of the day, if you can work through that, it may be more beneficial to your cognitive apparatus than all the million-year greats in the world. To that end, I say a lot of praise actually does heal the soul substantially. So it has its own place 100%. I'm not saying like, fucking praise makes you soft, fellas. You got to get fucking have a girlfriend punch you in the face, tell you ain't shit. You'll really be a man. No. But whatever, if life gives you yin or yang, if it gives you the good stuff or gives you the bad stuff, maybe even at the time, if you don't understand it, you can leverage the situation later, at least contextually in your head, and go, I'm going to take these things out of this situation. Because after I shat the bed and overtrained in that last show, it took me a while to like, what did I learn? Is people right away they'll ask you, right? Because I'm Mr. Authority. Like people will be like, what do you think you learned from your last prep? And like for the first couple of days, like, I don't know. And of course, still I was really pissed, and I was still enough drugs to make me pissed and overreaching, overtrained, so completely like just head barely underwater kind of feeling. And so my first inclination to tell them was, first of all, I don't know why I fucked up. And if you think you know, you are presuming you know more than me about the thing I'm one of the top experts in the world in, and also the thing I'm literally involved in myself. So whatever ideas you have about how I can improve, just fuck right off. But then I was like, it took me weeks to process, like, that's not a healthy mindset. That's not something you say to people. Luckily, I didn't say that to anyone. But it was this really crazy storm. And at many points during that time, I didn't know which way was up. And I didn't know if I was going to it's not true that some events may not make you stronger. Some people went through the Holocaust and, years later, like, did it teach you strength? Like, no, it didn't teach me shit. I just saw everyone die and that's it. And I have terrible dreams. And you're like, holy fuck. So that's definitely a thing that can happen. But in most cases, obviously, bodybuilding prep is infinitely easier than the Holocaust. Even when shit sucks, even if you're having a bad time in the moment, later you might be able to contextualize that and learn a lot from it. And only with great difficulty you really harden up. Special forces guys, they're not hard because they can shoot well, which is the number one reason you're a special forces, is you can raise your gun up and kill people faster. That's the number one skill by a long shot. But you get beat up enough, you get thrown into a swamp with a fucking compass and be like, see you later, bases, who knows where. You get thrown off that bullshit, you're just not scared like regular people are anymore. You've been in enough live fire situations where gunshots go off. You're like, oh, sweet, this is like what I do. And by analogy in bodybuilding, if your ascension is Phil Heath-esque, win, second place, disaster, Mr. Olympia, win, retire, right? That's dope. And that's like ideally what we all have. But even when you fuck up and you lose and you suck, like for me, my body water problem gets to be more and more a problem as prep goes on because of the rise in androgens, but also because I've been stress managing really poorly and just increasing my fatigue and being like, I'll just Ashkenazi Jew my way through this and just eye laser willpower. Sweet, that doesn't fix the body water problem. To me, that meant most of the preps I've ever done actually don't look better week to week. And I remember Jared told me once, he's like, I have no idea how you do it. I have like mega respect for you. I would have quit fucking years ago if I had your fucking problem. How do you still diet if you look worse sometimes week to week? And I'm like, well, I don't know, man. Like, I just keep going. And so, you know, enough of that hardens you the fuck up. So I guess the TLDR for people listening is like, if you win, it's unbelievable. And it fills your soul with a deep, nurturing nectar, which I think all of us need to some extent. It's like if you ask a girl out for the first time or the 10th time or the 100th time, and some girl finally says yes, there's no describing that feeling to someone that never felt it. It's like, your boy's in it. That's it. We did it. That's beautiful and that's awesome. But when you face hard times, even hard times that seem nonsensical, even hard times in which you're like, I just suck and I keep on sucking and I suck worse. That strengthens you. And maybe not at the time. It's a functional overreaching effect later psychologically. But boy, oh boy, does it do you a lot of good. I remember there's this one weightlifter who took like a way too heavy attempt. And it was like the most struggle anyone's ever had. It was like the slowest second pull ever. He barely got under the front squat. And then the front squat took like 4 seconds. And then he fucking re-racked. And everyone's like, no fucking way. And he fucking split jerked it. And he almost got it to here. And then he fought it. And he was like, and he dumped the barbell. I'll never forget this video. He dumped the barbell and he goes, like he yelled at the barbell. And everyone's like, my man. Like he gave everything to that lift. And even as he failed, he was like the stork eating the frog, and the frog's got his hand out and choking the stork while he's being eaten. Like that kind of shit. That like, I don't care. I'm losing. I'm looking worse. I don't give a fuck. If you can really feel like you don't give a fuck through those enough times, kind of in the gutter, in the drain, in the blender, you're going to harden up. And then just people say like, to be completely honest, people are like, yeah, man, bodybuilding takes a lot of sacrifice. I'm like, that doesn't feel like to me like it does. It feels pretty easy at this point because I've been doing this shit for so long and sucking at it and suffering. And now when you want to figure it out, Eric, especially with fatigue management, like my wife and I do less work now that we're trying to do a little bit more physique stuff. When you learn to do that, bodybuilding actually ends up being easier. And I think to end the world's longest rant, a lot of us fucking nerd scientist fucks, of which I was a long time before I was a bodybuilder and will be in the future. I think we tend to be more neurotic than average. We tend to be more precision oriented than average. And because some of us don't have the raw genetics that other people do, we go, you know what? I'm going to make up with this like I do with math homework on raw fucking willpower. That creates a cortisol bath for us that is just no good. And so a lot of people, I was talking to one of my friends, Broderick Chavez, about this. I was like, I read too many fucking Instagram posts by like, fucking Brian, you got to work harder. So I did that. I 18 weeks of deficit dieting later, I'm a piece of shit. And he's like, Mike, you have to realize people who write those things often, and the people who read them and to whom it really speaks, are people who like have trouble putting down their PlayStation controller for long enough to go get a workout. Like they need to hear that. You do not need to hear that. You need to back the fuck up and eat more food and sleep more and relax more and then just do this and you'll be great. And I was like, God damn it. So for years, it's just overworking by a long shot. And now I'm like 5.5 weeks out from like a test peak prep. My body's unprecedented because I'm just taking it a little bit easier on stuff. I really get people get into my head about failure training. And like, oh, I do a failure. Failure training doesn't work for me at all. It's just total nonsense. So I just try going way more RIR than usual. And just my strength progressing. Everything feels great. My body feels great. I'm 241 this morning. I have some glute striations, like best I've ever been because I backed the fuck up. But how could I be sure that backing the fuck up was a good idea? Because I know the very limit of the other way. Thank God I didn't overtrain type 2 overtraining where you just never come back. It was just type 1 overtraining where you're like, oh, it's going to take me months, but I'll eventually recover. Thank God it was that. But now that that happened, I'm like, okay, well, I never have to question if I'm working hard enough because just like with my MRV bullshit, everyone should find their MRV for muscles every now and again, just to make sure that you know what reality is. Because like with a 52, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the 52 set squat, the leg study, the quad hypertrophy study, what you can push to may be much higher than you think. And if you get close to that rarefied air and even a little beyond it, functional overreaching, you can arrange your training and your lifestyle such a way that you know that you have 99 problems, pushing hard isn't one of them. And then you can focus on relaxing or recovering more. And that's where hopefully shit comes together for me. And I'll finally make some friends on the bodybuilding stage. Ta-da.
Love it.
Thoughts? Concerns?
Cosign. Yeah, that's all I got, dude. I think that was I think you did a very good job explaining that and contextualizing even further. Yeah, There's a lot of lessons there. It was good, man. It's a good rant.
Mike, I'll put it this way. I do think in the future for yourself, I don't know what avenue. And I like what you also said, Mike, something we didn't discuss that you said, and maybe we'll end on this, where you said, I want you to explain it again, but you basically said how you do this for yourself. Like you want the stamp of approval. Yes, like to turn pro or to compete, but like the pageantry, like stepping on stage or many other aspects, you're there basically to see how you stack up. You might find some sort of artistic component in it, but it's deeply personal for yourself. And that it's a journey that you nonetheless do find fulfilling despite like some other people, let's say like Eric for himself, like Eric with his dancing background, being on stage is one of the components, right? Let me ask you this. You now have about 3 years. Currently, like who knows what, Mike, you turn pro, then you're like 42, it's going to 44.
I talked to Jay Cutler once about it, and he's like, "What are you doing with bodybuilding?" And I was like, "I think I want to try to turn Masters Pro the next few years, and then I'll do like one pro show if I turn pro, just to say, can you imagine being around pros and you're on stage? What the fuck's going on? Even backstage, you'd be like, hell." But he's like, "Nah, that's not gonna happen." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You're gonna turn pro, and then you're gonna be like, I'm gonna do more." He's like, "I told myself after every Olympia, I'd never do it again, and I always came back." And I was like, "God damn it, I didn't need to hear that shit." Then I was like, "Nah, it's okay, I could quit." Jay's Jay for a reason. So yeah,
So,
exactly to your point, Omar.
but yeah, let's actually skip to that. That's a better final question. So role play, like you're a very smart guy. You turn pro, like Eric just turned pro. You have, and I understand the health considerations and all those sorts of things, and the concept of perpetually getting better. If you cannot continue to improve, it's not something, it loses luster. I understand all that, Mike. But as you said, your prep right now, man, is going well. You play second, at a show, so like you're within striking distance.
Mhm.
If you keep improving, you don't think there's an aspect within yourself. We're not saying from 42 to 50, but do you really think that if, or let's say when you turn pro, the things might not change a little bit, like the time course? I understand all those like health considerations, but just 42, 43, like you don't think you might review that when that time happens? You couldn't fathom that being a possibility.
I could fathom it.
Yeah,
I could fathom it.
let's go, Mike.
Mostly fathom quickly. We're on a time crunch. So I mostly don't compete because I enjoy competing. To be completely honest, I don't really like competing much. And it's not the act of being on stage and stuff is like pretty cool, but I get plenty of attention in other ways. It's not for me, not like a coming out situation. I'm not very good at the art of posing. I don't so much care for it. I love it. I love seeing other people do it. Beautiful posing is amazing. But competent posing to me is what I aim to do. Just like, like Branch Warren. He's never been accused of being an amazing poser, but he hit all the mandatories like he was supposed to. God damn it. I'm like a working man's poser. Put that together. But obviously, like, Melvin Anthony, Flex Wheeler, etc. Like it's art, pure art. For me, the stage stuff that I don't like is like travel, putting in the fucking dog shit, oil crap, smells like shit. I hate it, get everywhere. Like having to wait for classes and 30 minutes out. And like, is that for real? They're like, well, I don't know. It could be an hour and a half. Like that all stuff is fucking for the beat, for the bites. That I like looking my best. And I'm perfectly content to do a bodybuilding competition on Zoom from the comfort of my own gym's excellent lighting. So for me, it's just about hitting that peak myself. And like, I love hotel room shots for bodybuilders. Like, I don't care that you're on a stage. Look at your fucking glutes. You're the man in my eyes. So that to me is why I do it. So competing automatically takes a backseat. So if I don't have to compete to try to turn pro or whatever, I may never compete again just because of that. So that's one thing. The other thing to me is I want to get absolutely better in bodybuilding. And at an age of beyond 42, I would have to have access to non-androgenic anabolic. I just as soon as I can be done with androgens, this too soon can't come soon enough. I hate taking the shit. I hate what it does to my brain. I hate what it does to my emotions. And interesting enough, just for more context, when I'm on enough gear, the only emotions I perceive are negative ones: anxiety, rage, recalcitrance, disagreeableness. And I don't have the textural quality to detect any positive emotions, but I have the cognitive bandwidth for it. So I look at like sometimes our property that we live on is they're super beautiful. These trees waving in the wind. And I look at them and I'm like, I used to feel things about those. I just don't feel it. I'm like, fuck that. Fuck all of that. So if you're like, hey, just take androgens for another few years and get the fuck out of my face. Hell no. ERT or just natty for life. No big deal. However, if I'm going to take a road at beating my drug look, I better have access to non-androgenic anabolics. And God damn it, if those goddamn scientists would work faster, or just let me take the new myostatin inhibitors they got tested on animals. And even saying I'd like to be a canary in the coal mine for that. If that's a thing, yeah, I could compete in bodybuilding, because you can imagine, like, if you look at just the basic literature of myostatin inhibitors, and we know that they work in skeletal muscle in large animals because cows do the shit, dogs do the shit. There's a couple children that are either heterozygote or homozygote myostatin negative, and they're, well, there's babies with like striated glutes, and you're like, what the hell's going on? That is the thing that steroids just hint at, fully unlocked, with no psychological anything. If that was a thing, if those were drugs that were readily available, or at least available in the black market, yeah, I could see myself bodybuilding FR until I was 45, 46, or whatever, as long as my blood work is good, and so on and so forth. Another thing to me is I'm 5'6", 240. It's not pleasant to be in my skin anymore. I'm just too goddamn big. Like, my legs don't move properly when I walk. My body's so fucking heavy, everything's so fucking big. I can't scratch my own back. Like, I don't know, man, that gets old. Because natural bodybuilders, you guys did it right. You're healthy, you look fit, you're actually fit. It's all gravy. But like, when you get big enough, the shit is just not so pleasant anymore. So that's a couple of factors that make me not so much want to continue. And another thing, lastly, is I have something that I like at least as much as physique development. And that is becoming a well-refined instrument of combat. I like jujitsu a lot. I liked wrestling in high school back when I did it. I fell in love with jujitsu years later, and I kind of want to become a killing machine. Not killing for real, but like, I want a black belt. I might. It's just there's not enough time in the day, but I want to become competent at basic striking. I have had the feeling before of feeling not so safe. Like a couple of teenagers at a grocery store, and you're also a teenager, and they kind of look at you and they're loud, they're kind of alpha. You can have that pale emotion. I did not enjoy ever having that emotion. And so nowadays, I don't really experience that emotion much, because if there's loud teenagers and they look at me, they usually look away. So, what the fuck is that? They're not looking its direction. But I hate looking scary and offensive. I don't like the way I interact with people in the real world, because I look legitimately like weird. I mean, my head shape doesn't help anything. I want to look lower key, so I don't want to be ultra jacked. I want to be like maybe 190 or something like that. But I want to be training jiu-jitsu all the fucking time. Scientific approach jiu-jitsu training. And I know just enough about game theory and sport to become, I think, really good in my own regard. And I'm going to compete in master jiu-jitsu until my fucking arms fall off. Every old motherfucker out there, you are on short notice. I'm coming for you. And I won't be doing that in the IBJJF because, well, I take drugs, and I don't think it would be fair for me to go do that. So it'll just be in local various other organizations. For anyone listening to knows jiu-jitsu, it'll make sense. But yeah, so I'm going to finish my bodybuilding journey on a high note. I'll always train for aesthetics and general muscular development. There's not a world I want to live in which I don't have big ass arms, unless I'm cybernetically enhanced and they're just like metal poles, and that's totally cool because robot body beats them all. But I want to look cool. I want to look jacked, but I just want to like really train the fuck out of jiu-jitsu, because I have a game which like works. And when you have something that works, system, again, same mentalities, I have everything. As soon as something works, I'm a little competent. I'm like, let's loop this up and see how far it goes. I think it'll go pretty far. So I'm excited about that. So that's all the reasons it's probably unlikely that I'll continue to bodybuild past age rush 42-ish. But listen, if those myostatin inhibitors hit the market, I'm going to fall ill with really nasty muscle wasting condition as far as the script is concerned. It's going to be, Eric, you're smiling, but it's going to be terrible. What am I to do except get 10 times the normal approved human dose of myostatin blockers?
I love how the first hour of this podcast was Mike and I finding all this common ground in this wacky world of bodybuilding that we compete in. And the last 15 minutes, I'm like, I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. This is where there is some divergence in the paths we've taken.
Sure.
But that is good though, in the sense that, as you joked about, Eric, like whenever you're on a podcast, we get it. And Mike, you're crushing on YouTube. It gets the clicks in terms of, hey, like I have this perspective, you have this perspective. But I do find it far more interesting how much common ground, as you shared, Eric, with Mike after you turned pro, and just like both of your like, yeah, there's a few differences, but there is more common ground, and I find that always more interesting. It kind of reminds me in a very different way currently. Like there's a power building kind of debate, Mike, going on in the natural, like let's call it. Go ahead.
Again? Well, what's I want to know, Eric, do you know about this?
My life is worse than I know about it. I'm going to leave it at that.
So, Mike, I'll tell you this. This is the most interesting part, though. Just the idea that, like, the responses to the videos. So, Milo and Pack visited me in early October just to hang out. And, like, yeah, we filmed some content. Our boy, the Nipples, Jeff Nippert, he was there. We're, like, thinking of various topics. Pack wanted to talk about the minimum effective dose. And, like, oh, what can we loop that in? Whatever. We'll talk about power building. Like, is it overrated? Cool. We filmed this, Mike, 3 weeks before a video by YouTuber launched, and then it caused so many response videos. If you watch our video, like it'll come out in 2 weeks, it seems like it's a response to what's coming out, but it's just how cyclical everything is within the community. But the point is that we know in general within the community that sort of I did this, the response, even jokingly, which the video I'm most excited that we did by far is the overhead press one, where you'll see like the intro that Mike did and so on and so forth. Well, I did a response to Mike's video, but that's what I said at the start. I have nothing but respect for Mike, so on and so forth. That
I never take it personally. YouTube is all nonsense anyway.
Yeah. But that's what's interesting. Like you two guys, like your viewpoints, especially when it comes to bodybuilding. And one of the things I'll say, Mike, on a personal note, and then I'll kick it over to Eric and we'll wrap this up, is that I respect, I think, like the paradigm I like that you have, I'd call it like relentless pragmatism, if that makes sense. So like you're relentless is number one. But I think part of what I identify with, like you think in probabilities, like what will get you the highest likelihood of success in order to do something. And so that's the pragmatic component of like, I'm choosing these things. What is the likely then outcome? And I'll attack it full force. And that is different because I do think within the space very differently now we're discussing, but in the natural side, I'm like, there's a little bit of what I'd call like naive optimism. I was joking with Eric, where we talk about the bros existing in the cracks, where the idea like kind of like God exists in the cracks. Like, well, we just don't know. It's like, well, if you just train harder, Mike, like you'll grow more. It's like, oh, you're not getting the results you want, and you just like turn the volume up to 11 type of approach, right? Where it's one, it's not nuance, but it's just the idea you can always find the bro in the area where you don't like solve for X, and we do not know what X is. Therefore, we must do this thing. So I like that combination on a personal note of relentless, like you'll attack it with all your willpower, your spirit, all those things. Yes. But it's also like, what's the likelihood of this approach actually being the correct one for me or getting me to my path? So I think one without the other, it is not as best served. So I just find that very interesting.
Thanks so much, Omar. There is absolutely no clash between smart and hard.
Yeah.
One potentiates the other. So you train as hard as is required, diet as hard as is required, and of course, you're smart. But at the end of the day, you just want the best results, don't you? I mean, I think that's a good idea. One of those is the only reason really I got into sports science. I wanted the best results for myself. And I was like, oh, there's this whole science here, so I might as well learn that. A lot of people nowadays, well, they go off topic, but there's this anti-intellectualist trend every now and again of look, just fucking work. And, I just don't hold those people in any kind of regards at all. Like you might as well just not have said anything. And, when I'm in my meter days, I say, you do this. And then the rest of us, we do this. We talk about things because we think in people and you're just a fucking animal. So just shut up and be an animal. And then some people say things like, just fucking work, man. It's not that complicated. They just have a bad time. Or they're in trend. And then all kinds of stupid shit comes out of your mouth when you're on that shit.
Eric.
I wouldn't know, but it is always insightful to hear your journeys on the other side of special sports supplements, the dark side of bodybuilding. That's right. No, but I think Omar, you encapsulated that very well, and it is always useful, I think, to see, despite very different personalities, motivations, experiences, that there is a lot of shared experience between people who compete in very hard things. I'll even broaden it beyond bodybuilders because this is our culture. And I think it's kind of cool. It's something I said off air, Omar. Maybe a good thing a positive uniting note to leave people on is that in my experience, and not all natural bodybuilders are going to like this. Hell, probably even some enhanced bodybuilders are not going to like this. But I think enhanced and natural bodybuilders on average have far more in common with one another than they do with just the average person in society, because we're pretty out there, to be honest, to decide
Most
to do
people
this.
can't even tell us apart. So
Yeah,
the internal
did our jobs right.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like you talk to someone who was like a dancer in modern dance, and you talk to someone else who was a dancer in like team coordinated dance, and you're like, you guys are both dancers, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, that's not the same thing. And everyone else like, shut the fuck up, you're a dancer. TLDR, same shit. Now, compared to people who don't dance, of course, you guys have more in common than you have different. But it's easy to get caught up in a little, like one of my favorite things ever was powerlifters versus weightlifters. Like, guys, you both have insanely irrelevant stories nobody cares about. It's at one of the Olympics. Don't care. Don't watch the Olympics either. That's what most people think about you. You got to stay united more. Because you get like a lot of haters with it. Like, man, like a lot of Olympic weightlifting, it was like, oh, powerlifting bastardization. A bastardization of what? You guys' sport has two fucking movements. Stop calling it a sport. Now, of course, I'm kidding. It's a beautiful sport with phenomenal athletes. It's just kind of like, you guys are going to hate on each other and think there's like 20 trillion differences between you. Nobody can tell you apart. I'll even add bodybuilders in the mix. You imagine you take a regular old Jewish man from New Jersey. You try to tell him what a bodybuilder, powerlifter, or weightlifter are. Which one are you? What the fuck? He doesn't understand any of that. Karen from Texas doesn't understand that either. At the end of the day, I think you guys have a wonderful title to your show with Iron Culture. It's all the same shit, folks. We're really, really getting really persnickety. We're like, well, not tactically speaking. Like, if you guys were like island teams people, we never deal with those. Are not lifters. They're not in Iron Culture. Get out. Everyone would be like, what? It's all same. You know what I mean? Like, I think that at the end of the day, it's like, if people can't really tell you apart, you can't be that much different.
Well said.
And I leave you guys with one really cool, super quick story that I think is exactly the title of your podcast.
Go. Hey. Good, because we were coming up with a good one. So this is perfect.
I might have told this before. Forgive me if I have, but this is the perfect show for it. This is to me one of my big symbolisms for what Iron Culture means to me. I was at one of the Arnolds where at the time, Andy Bolton had pulled 971 pounds for the world record to take it back from Benedict Magnusson. And he put it down. Everyone cheers, accolades, blah, 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 blah. And then, that's the last lift of the day. Nobody's going higher than that. And the bar just remained there for like 20, 30 minutes. No one's going to take it apart. Grips and all, 971 pounds. And I was like 20. And I looked at that bar for quite some time. And I had this insane revelation. Everywhere you look, jacked people. See, this is the WPOs. Everyone's a fuckload of gear, strongest people in the world. It's the Arnold, right? He's the world's strongest man competitors walking around. Bodybuilders, juiced to the gills. Everyone, strongest humans on the planet are there. That barbell right there, nobody can lift. And because Andy Bolton is tired, he can't lift it either, right? Just one man could do it. They don't give a fuck how strong you are, how jacked. Because every now and again, you get assholes at powerlifting meets where like the girls will finish and the last woman pulls 345 and some fucking juiced up fucking roid head bro is like there when his girlfriend comes up and fucking deadlifts it. He's like, yes, not bad. And he fucks off. I've seen that before. And you're like, all right, it's just disrespectful as fuck, but whatever, you don't know anything. Nobody could have done that with that bar. The fact that there was something sitting on the ground that nobody could do in the world except for one man, it never left me. I was like, whoa. You guys feel that spirit energy from that shit? There's something to that. And I was like, I will never forget that moment, because it was like Andy did something truly special, truly the strongest in a very obvious way. Because you could have brought in CNN reporters and be like, come here. See that barbell? Like, yeah, I bet you can't find it when they can lift it. They're like all over the world, Africa, Norway, all over. No one, not a single fucking person. And they would fly people out. They spend all the money. People tug it and nothing would happen. Only Andy Bolton. And I remember just like, that just hit me. And I was like, that's Iron Culture. The idea that like, in part, there's level and level and level. And there's the pinnacle. And even if it's just you for 5 minutes and that someone breaks your world record after or something, that's just a beautiful thing to me. That's art to me. So figured I'd share it with you guys.
Mike, I love it. A pinnacle, some would say a pyramid. Some would say some people are at the top of the pyramid, everyone's below. That's just how hierarchies work. I felt something similar, with Andrei Milanichev 2015 when he broke the squat world record, and at Boss of Bosses too. Epic, Mike. Yeah, and
You saw that weight,
oh yeah,
and you were like, just that one guy. That's it.
yeah. No, I'm 100% down with it. Go, Eric.
I would even say there is something like that when you see someone with the perfect peak who came in shredded and their best, like they just look untouchable on stage. In natural bodybuilding, I think probably Brian Whitaker's 2015 run where he took out people who have objectively better genetics than him because he reached a peak in a conditioning standard that is rivals anything on any stage.
Totally insane.
And there's something to be said.
Sure, or not.
Exactly. You know, you standing next to people who have glute vascularity, not even glute striations, and your eye just keeps going back to Brian because he looks just stupidly hard and granite-like and grainy. Similar to, for its era, Dorian Yates's black and white pictures. It's like, what is happening here? You know, so it's kind of that form follows function. So I think it's something that everybody can relate to, and it was a perfect story.
Iron culture keeps you hard, gets you hard. Mike, thank you so much for being on. We'll link all your socials in the description. We're hard just thinking about it. We'll definitely be having you back. As I understand, amongst the doctors, there might be some trip in the new year. So stay tuned for that. Very excited to see that. I want to thank every single person for listening to another episode of Iron Culture. You could go ahead and leave a rating and review on Apple iTunes. It does help us out. Typically, people will leave 5 stars. We leave it to your own discretion. We're back every single insert date here from now until the end of time. We'll catch you in that next episode.